Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you are keeping safe. My name is Okweyemi Oteri, the program manager. On behalf of the Dean of the Lagos Business School, Professor Nase Okunedo, we welcome you to one of the webinar series organized by LBS in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you are experiencing any challenge, you can always log in during the webinar. Kindly post your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Mr. Kelikume, the Agribusiness Academic Director and Head of Accounting and Economics Department, Lagos Business School, will be discussing the topic, venturing into agriculture/agribusiness in the post-COVID-19 Nigeria, the choice of sectors to invest in. Please remember, post your questions using the question and answers button so that we can reply you. And if we are unable to reply you because of the number of questions coming in, we will send the reply to your email address. Mr. Kelikume now will start with the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're keeping safe. It's a pleasure meeting and discussing the agribusiness sector at this valuable time in our life. I want to say it's another pleasure meeting some of the old agribusiness participants and students. So it's going to be another interesting time on the webinar session today. So this is one of the second of the series of our agribusiness value chain organized by the Lagos Business School. Once again, my name is Kelikume Ikechukwu. I'm the current program director of the Lagos Business Agribusiness program. Our topic today is venturing into the agribusiness space in the post-COVID-19 Nigeria. Question is, what sector are we going to be interested in the value chain? Our sessions will be taken in two parts. So the first part, it's a preamble looking at what exactly some of the things we talked about last week. Then the second part will hammer on the decision to invest in the agricultural sector. What are the current challenges and what sector can one play in the value chain? In between, we're going to break to ask questions. We're going to take a 1 hour session in a stretch. The first 40 minutes will take time out to to take your questions. So these are the topics we're going to be looking at: the current update on the COVID-19 pandemic, why the focus on the agricultural sector, the current structure of the agricultural sector, state competitiveness, what states should be looking at, because most states right now are going to be starved of the federal government funding directed to most of the states. So what is the current state competitiveness in the agricultural sector? We're going to look briefly at this. The second part will be to discuss the decisions on what sector to invest in the agricultural sector, the current export potentials for the sector, what the sad tales coming from previous investors in the sector. Then we'll take our question. No doubt, COVID-19 has created great tension across the world, of the world economy, and created different problems within different socio-political divides. The figure coming out from NCDC is also not encouraging, despite the president's announcement that there will be a gradual relaxing of the lockdown in Lagos, Ogun, and Abuja come May 4th. So despite the rising number of cases and deaths, we are hoping I'm praying that Nigeria will not be worst hit by the coronavirus pandemic, as predicted by the World Health Organization. The pandemic, no doubt, will pass, just like the Spanish flu and other pandemic that the world has seen in the time past. But we're going to be left with a lot of social disorders, social, economic, behavioral, lifestyle will certainly change. The way consumers buy, how we buy, when we buy will also change. This webinar session examines the post-COVID-19 investment choice in the agri-value chain. Beginning with the discussion on the current state, we all saw the figures go up yesterday, go up last night yesterday. As at the time I put this together, the total cases for Nigeria was 1,273 cases, whilst 40 were announced dead. But by this morning, the number has gone up to 1,337 cases, but we're still left with 40 dead. The global trend is also not coming down. The world today has witnessed 2,933,262 plus cases, whilst the total death is above 200,000. And we see a similarity in the trend. If you look at the trajectory, how the spike goes up, we see a similarity between what has taken place in Italy, in Spain. We see that kind of trend happening. That's why we say we know how to pray, Nigerians know how to pray. That's why we pray that we don't get hit by this pandemic. We all now know what is happening in Kano is linked to the coronavirus pandemic. So there has been so much talk. Question is, why the focus on the agricultural sector? Why are we currently focusing on the agricultural sector? Why not real estate? Why not other sectors of the Nigerian economy? The interesting story about agriculture is that every government, state government, federal government, multinational organization, they are all focusing on the agricultural sector and all focusing in Africa and in Nigeria because of the size of our population. There's so much coming in terms of funding coming to the sector. So why are we focusing on the sector? One is the overdependence on the oil and gas sector as the major source of foreign exchange earner for the country. It has actually exposed Nigeria. It has actually exposed the weak structure of the Nigerian economy. That is why everybody is saying we now need to diversify the Nigerian economy. We all know the current state of the global oil price. We all know that Nigerian crude, sweet crude, is trading at between $11 and $12 per barrel, even though it's lower than the cost of producing crude in Nigeria. Agriculture and agribusiness sector is the only sector that has direct forward and backward linkage with other sectors of the economy. The raw materials coming out of the agricultural sector feeds into the manufacturing sector, feeds into the social service sector, feeds into even your real estate sector. So the fear of food security is real, and if not addressed, can trigger social, economic, and security crisis. Nigeria's population of over 200 million people must be fed from the proceeds of homegrown agriculture. Agricultural sector, like I said earlier, is linked directly to basic and psychological needs of man. We talk about food, shelter, clothing, and wellness, especially your medicine, comes from the agricultural sector. This explains why investment in the sector is so important. Agricultural sector currently employs about 36.55% of our active labor force. Although this is a problem because most countries where you find more people in agricultural sector are termed very poor country. You can see the charts. United States has 1.66% of our labor force engaged in the agricultural sector. Canada has 1.95% engaged. Australia has 2.58% engaged in the agricultural sector. Then coming back home, South Africa has 5.55% engaged of her labor force engaged in the agricultural sector. These are countries that have gotten it right in terms of mechanization in the agricultural sector. Russia, Brazil also have a relatively low level of their labor force engaged in the agricultural sector. But when you come down to India, Chad, and Nigeria, the number spikes. You see that there's a problem here. And this problem directly links into the narrative that we've created for the agricultural sector in Nigeria, where we say, let's give small-time players funding to go into the agricultural sector. I actually fault the central bank policy, the national policy of funding and pushing funds to small-scale farmers, because the small-scale farmers do not have what it takes to go into large-scale agricultural farming. So if we is engaged directly in agriculture. The sector currently enjoys intervention fund from both local and international organizations. Everyone is looking at the agricultural sector as the next gold mine. Again, when we look at the structure, the current structure of the agricultural sector in Nigeria, you probably will see in terms of growth, when you're going into business, you go into the business that is termed the fastest growing sector. In terms of the fastest growing sector, agriculture cannot be listed amongst the current fastest growing sectors in Nigeria. Probably we'll see the likes of information and communication, you'll see air transport, you'll see road transport, you'll see trade, but you're not likely to find agriculture as one of the fastest growing sector. Agric is currently growing at 2.3%. On the average, the sector has maintained an average growth of 2.2% in the last 5 years. So however, in 2015-2016, Nigerian economic recession, agricultural sector was the only sector that maintained a positive growth in GDP. The sector maintained a positive growth in GDP. But when we look at in terms of contribution to GDP, you probably will find agriculture as the dominant sector in Nigeria because it employs more people and it's basically the sector holding forth the Nigerian economy. You can see the charts. During the crisis period, agricultural sector was immune from that crisis, the 2015-2016 economic crisis. However, the story today is likely to be different. The lockdown, as at that time, during the 2015-2016, 2017 crisis, there was no such thing as lockdown. The logistics and supply chain was not disrupted. What we find today is that there's a disruption in the supply chain, disruption in the logistics and in the food supply chain. Most of the big time firms, the hoteliers, buying directly from most of the processing plants are all shut down today. And all of this implies that there's a problem looming in terms of food security. Again, when you look at in terms of the share in GDP, agricultural sector is currently contributing 25.16% to GDP. The sector is structured into 4 sectors. Crop production is taking about 89% of agri sector GDP, leaving a whopping 11% to other sectors, to livestock, forestry, and fishing. So all of this tells us that one sector is doing so well in terms of size, whilst the other sectors are actually leapfrogging. In terms of share in GDP, you can see crop production doing 24.34% in GDP, whilst livestock is doing 1.67, forestry 0.29. Now this statistics is for end 2019. So we have a problem in terms of investment in livestock, investment in fishery, and investment in forestry. Forestry is what's hit, contributing about less than 1%, or about 1% to agri GDP in 2019. And you can visibly see this if you're traveling to Benin from Lagos and you look to your right and to your left, what you see is deforestation. We have chopped down all the trees and sold them to the Chinese. So the sector, it's actually, one of the things we say about the sector is that it is not agriculture that holds the key to developing the Nigerian economy, but agribusiness space. Agribusiness, as we say, is a construct that extends beyond farming to include operation in the upstream, in the pre-upstream, in the upstream, in the midstream, and in the downstream sector of the agri-value chain. It identifies with sets of activities that takes an agricultural product from farm to fork to the final consumer. It means agribusiness tends to be broader than agriculture. Again, just to expand on the narrative, pre-upstream sector is the first sector which deals with mainly the research institutes, controls, standards, quality, certification. The upstream sector is the beginning of the value chain, which deals directly with farming. It deals with farming and cultivation across the crop, livestock, forestry, and the fishing sector. Whilst the midstream sector is manufacturing, processing, packaging, tools, fabrication, design, distribution, agro-journalism. There are more that we can fit into the midstream value chain. The downstream, again, deals with shipping, logistics, export of value-added products, import of tools. So you find the multinational firms playing in the downstream sector. Now, when you hear people say they are in farming or in agribusiness, they are literally telling you that they are in the upstream value chain. You find over 80% of Nigerians play in the upstream value chain. So this brings us to the question of what is the competitiveness of states in the agricultural sector? What sector should states put their pie and their money in the agricultural sector? In the time past when we had regional governments, states were known for very strong cash crop. The western part was known for cocoa. Today's Delta, Edo Delta was known for...
Can you share your screen? Can you share your screen?
Hold on.
Thank you.
They can't see my screen.
No.
Who? Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in the time past, we had regional states where we had states focusing on certain crops. You find states focus on Edo State, for example, was known for rubber. Edo Delta, that's the Midwestern state, was known for rubber, was known for tree cropping, was known for mahogany, was known for timber. The western part was known for cocoa. We're also known for timber. Now, the northern part was known for groundnut and hides and skin. They're also known for cotton. All of these dynamics has changed. So if you look at the zoning, I actually looked at it in terms of geopolitical zone. When you look at the zoning, you will see that states are actually competitive in so many areas in the agri-value chain and in the crop sector. Take, for example, the northwestern zone. If you look at the geopolitical zone where you have Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. Two things stand out in these states, those states that I highlighted. You have rice for Kebbi, you have ginger for Kaduna, you have ginger for Kaduna. So Nigerian ginger coming out for Kaduna is known to meet international standard. Aside these two crops, you have hides and skin, pepper, sesame, soya, wheat, hibiscus, maize, groundnuts, millet, sorghum, vegetables, sugarcane. You know that Nigeria today imports sugar and sugarcane, sugar-related products. Cassava, cowpea, cotton, pepper, tomato, onion, fruits, garlic, and ginger. The northeastern part, Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Taraba, and Yobe also have almost the same kind of crop that you find in the Northwest zone. You have height and skin, sesame, soya, wheat, yam, rice, maize, hibiscus, millet, groundnuts, sodium, vegetables, sugar. The North Central zone, again, what you find similar to all of these, apart from similar to all sectors, cassava, where we say Nigeria is #1 in the production of.
Sorry, excuse me. Hello, sorry to cut in. Can you make it a slideshow? Thank you.
So what you find is that is similar across the northern parts is soya, is sesame. So you find sesame in northeast, you find sesame in northwest, you find sesame in north central, and you also find sesame in in where you find it is in Kogi. The entire north produces sesame. Interestingly, the #1 export item for Nigeria today is sesame. And again, interestingly, when you look at the active participants and players in that sector are actually foreigners and not Nigeria. The dominant player in that space is West African cotton. We have the largest sesame seed plant in Ikeja, Lagos. So not too many of us will know that the largest players are not Nigerians, they are foreigners operating in Nigeria. So in South, we have plantain, we have timber, we have rubber, we have cashew, we have yam, cotton, oil palm, coconut, cocoyam, rice, vegetables, and cassava. In Southeast, we have rubber, plantain, cassava. All of these things that I'm listing are actually not produced at a commercial level. They are all now done at very subsistence level. In Southwest, we have plantain, we have height and skin, we have timber, we have rubber, cassava, yam, cashew, cocoa, oil palm, coconut, rice, vegetable, cowpea, and cotton. Now, in all these cases, you will find that the major export crop coming out today is sesame, cocoa, and cashew. So we have 3 major export crops. We have lost the era of the groundnuts. We have lost the era of the oil palm. We have lost the era of the cotton. We have lost all those things that stood Nigeria out in the 70s and in the 80s. So question, I'm going to pause here to take your questions. I'm going to pause to take your question, given that I have thrown some light regarding state competitiveness, where we think that states can play in the sector. So for example, I raised 2 questions there. Why are states not focusing on their agricultural potentials and competitiveness? Since 1970, so much funding has gone into the agricultural sector through various government initiatives, but very little to show for it. Why is this so? So these are probing questions. I'm going to throw in some light. I'm going to answer these 2 questions, but I need your own questions.
Thank you very much. We are still waiting for questions. Nobody has posted a question yet. Hello, please post your questions to the question and answer, using the question and answer button. I think we can continue pending when the questions start coming in.
We don't have questions?
Not yet.
Okay. So
okay,
let's take...
Hello, sorry, one just came in now. Okay. You said we have lost exports in the 70s and 80s. How do we revive these areas, and how can individuals employ this?
So, and I will answer that question when I'm taking the second part of the slide, which will show us that it is pretty difficult for you to catch up when you look at the numbers. Take, for example, we keep telling ourselves this story that Malaysia came to Nigeria and they took oil palm from Okomu and they took it back to Malaysia. And today, they are the second largest producer of palm oil in the world. We keep telling ourselves that story without looking at what does the statistics about oil palm say. We need to look at our yield per metric tons. We need to look at our yield, our current yield, and compare that yield with that of Malaysia and Indonesia. It will surprise you to know that 90% of the world oil production is taken by these two countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, whilst the rest of the oil-producing nations actually takes up 10%. Nigeria falls among the countries that are currently taking up the 10%. So if you're going to revive the oil palm sector, you're going to be faced with one Herculean tax, and that tax is your yield per hectare. Your yield per metric tons, it is very low. So you're looking at the neighborhood of 2.2 tons against 17, 18 metric tons. So those countries that are doing more than you are actually going to produce and send to your country. So if you look at the statistics this year, Nigeria actually imported palm oil. We imported palm oil. So in answer to your question, we need to make a business case of whatever sector we are going to play as a country. We need to look at those things that are listed along the lines of states and geopolitical zones. Those mandate crops that are listed. We need to look at those crops and begin to ask ourselves, can we begin to focus on our area of strength and move away from those areas where countries have actually taken strides? And that number one is oil. Another way you can survive in the production and cultivation of oil is palm oil, is if government places significant restriction on oil, on palm oil products coming into Nigeria. But you cannot do that. You have a population of about 200 million people. We cannot meet the demand for Nigeria, not to talk of exporting palm products. We have another question. Okay, I can't hear you.
What is likely to happen to the prices of food items after the lockdown?
There's already scarcity. So that question is so simple to answer. You cannot store food because they are perishable. The only thing you can do is to buy tomato now, buy pepper, blend them and put them in your freezer. And even when you put them in your freezer, you need generators to continuously power your freezers. So we have infrastructure decay. We have a lot of issues. You can't buy heaps of yam and store those yams. They'll decay. So what will happen is that we have missed the first planting cycle. The second quarter, we have actually missed it. This is the period where we find maize all over the place. If you look around, you can barely see maize around. This is the period Nigerians eat up their maize. We cannot find those maize. The rains came late. Farmers have been asked to stay at home. There's a lot of fear. So farmers will go into production late if we ease out the lockdown. And by so doing, you're likely to find scarcity during the Q4 at the fourth quarter of 2020. If you look at what is happening to Kano today, Kano is the food basket. Kano has the largest commodity market in Africa. If you look at what is happening to Kano today, it is bound to affect your agricultural produce. It is bound to affect grains. So rice price will go up, beans price will go up, all of these things will spike. And this tells us that in the next cycle, next year, we need to plan very well against food insecurity. Any other question?
Okay. It appears you insinuate that playing in the upstream part of the agribusiness is unprofitable.
Not true, not necessarily true. because I am actually playing in the upstream value chain. I also started planting palm and coconuts 2 years ago, and I am moving towards between 2,000 and 3,000 pounds. The question is, this sector that I am labeling the upstream sector, it's a very, very dangerous place to play. It is dangerous when you don't understand it. So it is dangerous for those who don't understand it. In order for you to play in the upstream value chain, you must be competent at what you do. You must have studied that sector very well, and you must be prepared to hedge against all manner of risk, all manner of exposures that you find within the upstream value chain. It's so easy to tell about the upstream value chain. You are close to weather, you are close to soil, variation in soil type, you are close to acidity of the soil, you are close to diseases and pests. I called one of my past participants who was into the grain sector, and I asked, how are you doing with your maize? Guess what he said? Army One wiped us out of that business. We are no longer there. We are no longer into maize. So you have all kinds of sad stories coming from people that are not fully prepared before jumping into the upstream value chain. And I'm not just referring to crops. I'm talking about livestock. I'm talking about fishery. I'm talking about forestry. If you delve into forestry, you're going to plant today and wait for between 8 and 25 years before you start recovering your funds. So how many of us will want to wait for 25 years to begin to reap the benefits of our reward? So that's why the upstream sector is volatile. But interestingly, without the upstream sector, there is no downstream and there is no midstream. Without us investing, without us being altruistic, without us having that love for agriculture, we will die. It is as simple as ABC. So government and all stakeholders must come in to see how to make the upstream sector work. Any other question?
Okay, yeah. Do you want to take one or two more?
I can.
So, okay. Babatola Ikechukwu is asking, timber plantations, are they not sectors we should look into?
So that's one of the things that I talked about. We must make a business case. We must make a business case before entering into such sector. I used to tell this narrative in class. A farmer visited me and said, somebody asked me to plant ogbono. The ogbono tree is one hardwood that can be sold for export at maturity. And the young man said he had planted a lot, acreage of ogbono, and it's exciting that he's going to make so much money. But I looked at him and laughed. I asked him this simple question, how old are you? He said he was 55 years old. He was planning his retirement with the ogbono. And I told him, the variety of ogbono you've planted, you're going to start harvesting the ogbono seed 25 years from today. So add 25 years to your age, it will be 80 years. And the young man screamed, 80? So again, you have planted a tree crop for the community. At that age, you will not be able to harvest that tree crop. So, but when I took participants to Ibadan, we discovered a variety of ogbono. It's a vineyard crop that you can actually plant and harvest after 6 years. You start harvesting. So this is a tree crop that you can plant on your land. A lot of us have landed properties that we've not put them into use. They're just there. So if you plant, in 6 years, you're likely to start what? Reaping. In 25 years, it becomes one cash crop. It becomes an economic tree because it can be sold for export. So again, we need, as individuals, as private sectors, we need to make a business case of what we want to do. It's either you want to do the perennial crop or you want to do the long-term gestation cycle crop. Any other question?
Okay, Dr. Adekombi is asking,
Yeah.
why is our yield per hectare so low, even for rice and almost any other crop? Why is this so?
So why it is low depends on you cannot plant rice. There's what we call the rice belt. So if you're not within the rice belt, I just showed you the data. You cannot take, for example, that you want to do rice in Lagos. So there's a rice belt. If you are not in the rice belt, you probably will not be able to do what? Get that yield. Again, agriculture is about mechanization. Agriculture is 70% science. It is 70% science. It is 20% experiential learning, and it is 10% art. What most people don't know, or what most people think when they are entering this sector, they look at it as 70% experience. You see, my father did these things before and they did not go to school. What they did was subsistence farming. What you're doing is commercial farming. So you really need to understand the nature of the sector that you're going into. Our yield is poor because we don't listen to what researchers are saying. Our yield is poor because we enter without going to the research institute to find out the best seed, the best soil type. Our yield is poor because we don't even carry out soil tests. We just jump into these things because we have money. And our yield is poor finally because of our geographical location. So there's no way Nigeria can compete with Indonesia on oil palm because of their geographical location and our geographical location. There's no way Nigeria cocoa can compete with Ivory Coast cocoa because of the difference in geographical location or factor. We call it factor endowment, how God blessed those countries. Any other question? Any other question?
Okay, the last one before we continue. The last one before we continue.
Okay.
Please expatiate in detail about the upstream and downstream sectors of agriculture.
Okay, the upstream is direct farming. So the upstream is direct farming. If you're going into
expatiate in detail about the upstream
and downstream. So if you're going into farming, direct farming, farming is structured in such a way that we have crop, we have livestock, we have fishery, and we have forestry. Forestry means that you're going into tree cropping. Fishery means that you're going into aquaculture. You're either going into tilapia, scaly fish, or you're going into catfish. Livestock means you're going into ruminants. You're going into, you want to rear goats, cattle, pigs, rabbits. So if this is what you want to do, you're actually playing in the upstream value chain. Crop production takes about 89%, like I said earlier. If you're going into planting of maize, planting of cassava, if you're going into planting of coconut, planting of palm, if you're going into planting of sesame, if you're doing all of this, you're playing in the upstream value chain. However, if all you want to do is aggregate whatever is coming out from the direct farming, you're playing in the midstream value chain. It's either you're playing in logistics, you're packaging, you're distributing, you're a journalist, you're writing about the sector and making money from writing, you are playing in the midstream value chain. If all that you want to do is play in between these two spaces, play at the end of the value chain, which is the downstream, export commodities. Today we know that Nigeria is exporting chili pepper, Nigeria is exporting dry okra, Nigeria is exporting ogbono, Nigeria is exporting a lot of things, but not in commercial quantity that can meet that quantum size that we're talking about. The only one that is currently meeting the quantum size is sesame and cocoa. If you're going to play in that space where you'll be exporting cocoa, you'll be exporting cashew, you'll be exporting sesame, you are actually playing in the downstream value chain. All these sectors come with their own nuances and idiosyncrasies. They all come with their own problems. So if you take the upstream, downstream sector, a lot of farmers who are in the downstream sector suffered in the month of January, February. The month of January, February is the month where you aggregate cashew for export. The largest country where we send our cashew to is Vietnam. Vietnam has actually shut their borders because of the COVID-19. So most of the players in the cashew value chain, that took loans from bank that stored cashew to export in January, February 2020 are in trouble because you are exposed to the exchange rate risk. Now, most players within the agri-value chain are also exposed within that sector. I believe I've expounded on it and I've explained the difference between the upstream, midstream, and the downstream sector. The pre-upstream, which I talked about earlier, is where you have those multinational firms, the likes of IITA, funded by the Rockefellers, where they go into massive research to make sure that the goods that you produce, they increase in yield and in quality. So you cannot play in the pre-upstream because you require a lot of funding to go into research. That's why we leave that space for the government, multinationals, and NGOs. But you can actually play in between these spaces. I believe I've answered your question. Do we have any other question?
I think you should continue now. We'll take more questions later.
So one of the questions that I asked is, why are states not focusing on their core strengths? There's a complete link between what the government...
Your slides.
You said?
Your slides. The slideshow.
Okay. Oh, it appears I'm awful. Okay. Can you?
Yes,
is it showing?
Okay. Yes.
So one of the questions that I asked is, why are states not focusing on their agricultural potentials and competitiveness? The reason is federal allocation. States wait for the federal to push funds to them. All of this will change. In the next 2 months, the federal allocation will dry up. States will start owing salaries. They will start singing new tune that agriculture is the next big thing. But remember that states has enormous power to go into the long gestation cycle crop, like the tree crop that somebody mentioned about. So states should begin to look inwards to say, what are those crops that they can leverage on in order to grow their various states? However, government, like I say in my economics class, government has no business in business. Every time a state government pushes fund into the agricultural sector, they just sink fund. Lagos State tried it when they went to Benin Republic and they tried to clone the Songhai farms. They brought it into Badagry, wasted a lot of money in setting up the Songhai initiative in Lagos. It was a failed project on arrival. Port Harcourt, Rivers State tried it, a failed project on arrival. Most of the states that did the same thing actually failed. Government's role is to create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive in the agricultural space. Government is the chief security officer of the state. Government also owns land. If you look at the land tenure system, government must make an endeavor to release, to create cluster farm settlements where farmers will be able to do what? Even lease land from government at relatively cheap rates, such that these people can become very productive. So the reasons why they are not doing this is because of the oil and gas sector, where they keep getting the stipends from our big father, the federal government. Since 1970, so much funding has gone into the agricultural sector through various government initiatives, but very little to show for it. I think it's about the method and the narrative. We keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. Each time you say fund small-time players, these small-time players can barely aggregate a plot of land. So when you put all the small-time players together, they certainly cannot buy tractor, they certainly cannot go into research, they certainly do not even have the wherewithal to drive the knowledge in the agricultural sector. So when you aggregate these people and you fund them, the result is that they are going to have more, sorry to say, they'll marry more wives, have more children, and create more problems for us, which is what we are seeing today. Our population is rising, our youth population is high because we have deliberately pushed funds to sectors where we are not supposed to push funds to. Government and the private sector need to come out clearly to push resources to sectors that are highly productive. So what sector should coming to the second part of my slide, of my analysis, what sector should I invest in? Which sector in the value chain is the most lucrative sector? What is the strength of the Nigerian non-oil export sector? Has anything changed since the composition of the Nigerian exports? What are the current export potentials of the Nigerian economy? I know some of us will be waiting for me to direct you to go and do this or go and do that. I am not a one-day agribusiness portfolio officer that will tell you, bring your money and put in snaring and you will make so much money. Bring your money and put in cassava, in starch, and you are going to make so much money. I'm going to direct you to those things that will help you in taking a decision on what sector to play in the sector without necessarily pushing you to a particular sector. So a major reason why investors enter into the agricultural sector, agricultural value chain, is to make money. They want to make money. If you ask every one of us, we are in this space because we want to make money. However, if your aim of entering the sector is to make quick wins, you better think again. This sector is different from other sectors of the Nigerian economy. It has a product life cycle ranging between 3 to 50 years. So imagine that you plant today, you harvest in 50 years. So it has a production cycle that covers this range. So for example, if you decide to go into large-scale coconut or oil palm production, your first 5 to 6 years of investment will be negative returns. You're going to be plowing in and spending in preparing, in clearing, in tilling that farmland for the next 5 years. Now, when the product, if you take the terminal seed, if it starts producing by the 6th year, you're not making profits because you're not producing at optimal yield. You make optimal yield between the 10th and the 12th year of your production, of your planting. So oil palm has an economic lifespan of 45 to 50 years. You attain optimal yield between the 10th and the 12th year. So we must know all of this before jumping into this sector. The decision to invest in the agricultural sector must not be based on the profits you think others are making. Never get carried away by the one-day portfolio seminar organizers who tell you about profitability in poultry, fishery, cassava, and snaring. There are many more. They tell you just bring your money. We will organize it for you. You will make money. Don't get carried away. It is not true. The easiest sector to lose your hard-earned savings is the agricultural and agribusiness space. If you enter without adequate preparation, so you can see I underline the word adequate preparation. If you do not prepare adequately, you will certainly lose your money. The decision to enter must begin with the identification of gaps in the agri-value chain. Closing the identified gaps implies taking advantage of existing opportunities. Take, for example, if you look at the raffia palm, the whole of the Ibejuleki cluster was gifted with the raffia palm. Although we have destroyed the raffia palm, if you ask, what do we need the raffia palm for? Urbanization came and we started uprooting those raffia palm. When you're going towards Ekpe, all that you see around to your left and right is not palm trees. They are all raffia palm. What do we do with the raffia palm? From the raffia palm, you produce your local gin called Ogogoro. From that same raffia palm, you produce spirit. Today, there is no household in Nigeria that does not have spirit in its pocket because of COVID-19. We are all using spirit to cleanse our hand. That spirit is from where? Ethanol. This ethanol is from where? Raffia palm. We can also get it from cassava and we can get it from maize. So in the decision to enter must begin with gap identification. Once you identify a gap, you run with it. So the way the agribusiness sector is currently structured, there are so many gaps and so many opportunities, but sadly, only very few entrepreneurs can see these opportunities. So what we do in this space is that we follow the bandwagon effect. You hear a man say, I'm going into cassava production. Before you say Jack, he has already bought land, he has planted. When you ask him, what kind of stem did you plant? He will tell you, I just planted cassava. For crying out loud, there are 46 varieties of cassava. 46 varieties. So if you're going into ethanol production, there's a particular cassava variety you must plant. If you're going into cassava gari, fufu, there's a particular variety that you must plant. If you're going into starch, there's also a particular cassava variety you must plant. If you're going into brewing, the brewing industry, that's where they use the 419, the TME 419 was the one they were talking about us at that time. So we must understand all of this, that you don't just jump into a space you do not understand. Sorry. So you don't just jump into a space you do not understand. The first step to entering the agricultural value chain is not to search for funds. Most people think that it is money. In fact, one of the things I share in class is that the more money you have, the likelihood that you will fail. Once you have money, you start making all the mistakes in the sector. Once you don't have money, you start thinking and preparing yourself ahead. So the missing gap in this sector is not funding, but knowledge and competence in producing optimally. In setting up an agribusiness enterprise, the following questions must be answered by investors. What is the business about? What exactly, who am I? What am I getting into this business? What is my mission? What's my value statement? Is the business in the upstream, midstream, or downstream sector of the agribusiness value chain? If it is upstream, you have a lot to contend with. You need to plan. How do I secure my plant? Because you can plant and somebody will harvest all of it during harvest. How do I secure my crop? How do I protect against when there's no rain? Just like the rains didn't come early this time. How do I guarantee safety and security of my farmers? How do I guarantee against flood? You need to ask a lot of questions when you want to play in the upstream value chain. Above all, where do I even sell my produce at harvest? Does the business cut across all the value chain? Where should the business go in the short term and the long term? What's my goal and objective? How will business get to its destination, growth and strategy? How many years am I entering into this space? Is it a going concern that will outlive me? If you look at hens, ketchup is more than 100, I think it's more than 100 years old today. And when we buy that product, we forget that it is tomato, pepper, onion based. What kind of resources does the business need to get? So we're looking at land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. One of the biggest challenge you find in this sector is labor. How do we get the people that will work for us in our farmland? What is the startup capital for this investment? Again, you need to define your financial strategy. Most people start this first, but I dare to say it is what you start last. Having done your feasibility, having gone to the market, having done your analysis, that's when you now know, okay, I need XYZ amount. How do I get it? Am I going to fund it by equity? Or am I going to fund it by debt? Again, one of the things we say, agricultural sector is not a sector you fund with debt. Do not borrow and enter into the upstream sector. You borrow when you are about expanding. You do not borrow when you are starting. So the mistake the central bank and most lenders are making is that they lend to starters. I call them rookies. So they're going to lend with your fund. You don't lend. Agric is subject to multiplier principle. Let's give you an example. If someone there is going into plantain cultivation and you need to go into, let's say, 1,000 hectare or 100 hectare farmland, or let's say 1 hectare farmland, and you are planting 1,000 stock of plantain. After the first harvest, you're going to get, for every plantain you harvest, you're going to get six suckers. Multiply 6 by 1,000, that gives you 6,000. It is at the point of 6,000, that's the second farming season, or the third farming season, where you now have 18,000 sucker, that you begin to think of getting funding, not when you are starting with the 1,000. You need to enter the 1,000 with your savings so that you don't get into trouble. So does the would-be investor have a firm grip of the market? This is key. You cannot jump into this space without having a firm grip of where you are going to sell your products. So let us examine the decision to invest in the oil palm sector. So if you look at this chart, 80% of the time, players are in this space because of palm oil. They do not know about the husk. They don't know that you can use the husk to grow mushroom. They don't know about the pulp cake. They don't know about the pulp oil, which we call the palm kernel cake and the palm kernel oil. They also do not know about the medicinal value of the palm kernel oil. They do not know about the animal feedstock or the solid fuel that comes out of the palm kernel. All they see is palm oil, and palm oil earns them naira. The other part of the value chain earns them in dollar. You cannot run the pig venture successfully without the PKC. You cannot run your animal feed venture without the palm kernel cake and the palm kernel oil. So these are residues that are needed in that space, but you find most people play significantly in the oil sector. Interestingly, when you look at the data, what the data speaks is data speaks volume. So the first data looks at comparative analysis between Nigeria, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So if you look at the yield, you discover the yield per the tons per hectare. You find Nigeria is doing 2.5 metric tons per hectare. Malaysia is doing 11.11. Malaysia is doing 13.36 per hectare. That's, I'm looking at 1961, when we started, 1961. Whilst Indonesia was doing 11.55 per hectare. But when you come back to 2018, you will see Malaysia 17 tons per hectare, Indonesia 18.8 tons, metric tons per hectare, Nigeria 2.6 tons per hectare. What this tells you is that between 1961 and 2018, the curve has been flat for Nigeria. We have not done much in terms of research, in terms of getting out of this low yield trap. If you go down and you look at productivity, production per metric ton, you will see Indonesia currently doing 115.3 million metric tons, whilst Malaysia is doing 78 metric tons. Nigeria is doing 7.8 million metric tons. When you look at the beginning, 1961, we started well. Nigeria was doing 6.7 million metric tons, higher than Indonesia and higher than Malaysia. Along the line, we remained flat. Between 1961 to date, we have only gained a very slight fraction in the tonnage that we produce in the country. So the analysis here tells us that it is safer for you to import palm oil. That is why when you look at the statistics, the number for 2019, Nigeria actually imported palm oil from India, from Malaysia, from Indonesia. We actually imported palm oil. And some will say, what a case. How can a country like Nigeria, that you have palm growing all over the place, import from this country? In terms of our current export potentials, Nigeria's current major export crop are sesame, cocoa, frozen shrimps, sesame oil, and cashew. So these are basically what we currently do. If you look at the previous time past, our export potential was palm oil, cocoa, cotton, rubber, hides and skin, timber, mahogany, and groundnuts. When you see the analysis, it tells the true story. The value of Nigeria's oil exports still dominates at above 80%. So this is the current statistics, Q4 2019. And you'll see how insignificant our agri export is, despite the funding that has gone into the sector. When you look at the value of our major imports, you also see how insignificant it is. Nigeria is actually importing some agri products. You know the data I showed you, competitiveness. There are some states in Nigeria that are competitive in the production of sugar, but Nigeria actually imports granulated sugar into the country. So if you look at the top major traded agricultural products, so this is picking out the top from our statistics. You will see sesame, cocoa, sesame oil, cashew. But Nigeria, we know, has potentials in cassava, starch, in oil palm, in coconut oil, in plantain, in flour, in cotton, in hides and skin, in rubber, and many more. So why the terrible tale from investors who have ventured into this sector? So if we had the opportunity of asking participants here, how many of us have failed in the sector? You will see that 80% will tell you they have failed. So why is this story rampant, that people enter and they get their fingers burnt? Almost all investors that have entered the upstream value chain has one or two sad stories to tell about the sector. The question is why? The answer is simple. Agribusiness is almost 70% science, 20% experiential learning, and 10% art. Most investors underestimate the challenges that come with the investments in the sector. They enter the sector with little or no prior knowledge of the legal, institutional, environmental, and cultural challenges in the sector. At the point of entry, some are already tired and retired from active service. How can a man of 60 take his retirement money and plug it into the upstream value chain where he can barely, he's no longer strong, where we need youthful burst of energy? You find a weak man taking his money into that space. This is why they lose their money. Having so much money or easy money at the start of the business. So when you have so much money, I met a young man who borrowed money from Anchor, the CBN Anchor Borrowers Fund, and channeled it into yam production without understanding yam. And he was busy waiting for harvest. By the time we visited the farm, I looked at the method of yam planting that he has carried out. Without even digging up the yam, I told him, young man, you have nothing to harvest this year. What you have underneath those heap is seed yam and not tubers. And he said, I shouldn't say it, that God forbid. I said, bring me your hole, let me dig up one, and I'll show you the errors, the mistakes that you have made. By the time we dug up one, we saw seed yams, small tubers, because he did not understand. He borrowed money and channeled it into a sector that he barely understands. The more money you have, the likelihood that the money will be wasted if you are not properly prepared. The decision to venture into the agribusiness sector must not be based on what others are currently doing in the sector. Entry must be based on accomplishment of a burning desire, dream, vision, driven by overwhelming passion to succeed. Without passion and staying power, you cannot survive, you will run. This is why we say of every 20 poultry farmers that enter into the poultry value chain, at the end of the second year, only about 3 will be left. Because they do not have the staying power, because they do not have the passion, because they are not driven by the overwhelming desire to survive. So the watchword, do not enter the agribusiness space because of the perceived notion that there's quick money to be made. The sector is unlike other sectors. It's a sector that requires patient capital, hand-holding, training, and continuous innovation. You cannot set up this business and run it by proxy. It is very difficult to survive as an absentee farmer. We find most people, they're working in the city and they set up farms. They put somebody in charge of the farm. You have started failing from the start, ab initio. You must be on ground physically or invest massively in technology if you must succeed in the sector. Thank you very much. I believe with this few, I have been able to channel your energy, because I am not supposed to tell you where to go and put your money, but to direct you, let you know that there are ABCs that must be done that will enable you to know what sector to play in the agri-value chain. Any question?
Thank you very much for the insightful discussion so far. Before we continue, just to remind our participants that we have an executive program on agribusiness management program that is 15 days spread over 5 months. And this program is not theoretical. You can see what I'll be saying all this while. We also invite industry experts to the class, where they will tell you from the scratch the challenges they are facing and everything. And we have these people who will handhold new farmers. So we have 2 runs in Lagos, 1 in Abuja, and we are working on having 1 in Port Harcourt. Now to the questions. The number 1 question from Enaya and Tonne is, why have we not been able to attract enough foreign investment in agriculture by big international farmers? Ranches are not being developed to support milk production in the country. Why are we not able to attract foreign investments in agriculture?
Okay, can you give me the second question?
Okay, second question is that, Bawola Biodele, what is the future of avocado plantation as a profitable agribusiness in Nigeria?
Third question.
Okay, those roads, do we really have a synchronized planning system between the agribusiness sector and other sectors like housing in Nigeria? Because most of the cash crops being destroyed for mass housing, even when existing places are not developed. Then another question by Harold Monu. What are the pros and cons of going into snail farming?
Okay, so let's take the first one. The first one talks about why do we not have foreign investors come into the sector? I think that's not true. Most of the firms that are actually the big time players in the downstream sector are actually multinational firms. So when you hear the Chi group, we tend to confuse Chi. With some of us will tend to believe that Chi is Chi. The Chi group, your Chivita, they're in the agri-value chain. They came in quietly, and today Coca-Cola has bought a share into the Chi group. So that's a multinational firm. When you hear West African Cotton within the agri-value chain, the leading company in the sesame value chain, they are also multinational firms playing in the agricultural sector. You need to visit their plants to imagine the size of their investment. They're actually aggregating sesame in Lagos, not for the Nigerian market, not for the Lagos market, for about 5 European markets, and earning foreign exchange from those sales. Now that the dollar is going up, that company will be smiling home. Then you have the Ollams of this world. They are multinational firms also playing in the downstream sector. They play in that sector where they export, they fine-tune, they add value, and they sell, and they make money. But you find most, like I said earlier, most Nigerians do not understand where to play. They jump into the upstream and they make a lot of noise. There are two kinds of farmers within the upstream. You have the generals that entered into the upstream value chain. Now, they entered with so much money. Those investments are not necessarily profitable investments. So we visited a lot of farms from our agribusiness program, and we've seen that each of those farms we entered, from the gate, you will know that this is not a profitable venture. This person just lost money here. It's like going to Obasanjo farms. When you get there, you will know that this is not a profitable venture. So we have the generals and we have others going into this space. We have a lot of people that do not understand what sector to play in. So I think the multinationals are coming, but the greatest challenge that they are facing, there are security issues in the sector. Most of the ginger farmers, the Chinese are into ginger. The Chinese are into most of these little crops that we talked about. They are into these crops in the north. They are the ones exporting it. Because of the volume they are doing is so small, that's why it didn't appear on our list. So we want Nigerians to begin to look into these spaces to see how they can play with this sector. As simple as the okra, it can be exported. As simple as your ogbono, it can be repackaged and exported. As simple as somebody talked about avocado here. I believe I've answered the first one, so let me move to the second one, avocado. For those of us that want to go into avocado, you must make a business case for avocado. When you finish planting avocado, let's assume that you are starting with 1,000 trees. Where's your first pot of call? Your first pot of call will be to get into an agriculture and agribusiness class to get trained. When you finish your training, in the course of the training, you would have visited the likes of IITA, or you would have visited the seed crop in Ibadan. You would have visited Ibadan, where you take away the hybrid avocado crops. So once you visit these institutions, you probably will learn more about how to plant, where to plant, the geographical locations where these crops are suitable for. But having planted, you're going to wait for the next 7 years. And the waiting period is, what am I going to do? Remember, you are going to space your avocado. When you space your avocado, what are you going to do in between those spaces within the next 7 years? It's either you're planting a cassava, you're planting melon, or you're doing other things that will guarantee that you can pay labor to clear and till this soil. Because for the next 6 years, you have to prepare this farmland that you have planted 1,000 avocado. At harvest, you're going to contend with another problem. Where is this market? Where is this market? This market, those who control this market are not players in the upstream. Those who control this market are largely women. So if you go to Yaba or Igbo market, you will see them. They are women. They tell you the price of what you're selling. So you need to define this market. Where am I going to sell if I'm going into avocado? But by and large, it is a good venture for you to go to say you are going into avocado. It's also a good venture for you to say you are going into coconut, because from coconut you get coconut oil. When you look at 1 liter of coconut oil, it is very expensive. Who buys your coconut oil? The pharmaceutical companies. So we take it to the next one. I talked about value add. The third question actually zeroes in on value add. Many of us don't know that the biggest challenge we're having is in crop production is that 50% of our produce is lost annually. So wherein lies the opportunity? The opportunity lies in storage facilities. How do we begin to prepare ourselves to store these things during periods of harvest and sell during the off-peak period? Take, for example, your maize. Every year the maize comes out, we waste it. We literally waste the maize. It is cheap, it is everywhere. But before you know it, the price of maize has gone up at a particular season. Because we don't store, we actually do import maize in the country. So we need to begin to think through processing and storage facility. So the next question talks about snaring. So this is the one that I know the person asking this question know that I'm into snaring. So this one, snails, you cannot rear snails, especially those of us in Lagos. It's difficult to rear snails. It's difficult to rear snails when your soil is not loamy soil. When your soil is sandy, quick soil, you cannot successfully rear snails. When your soil is rich in alkaline, snails will die. Alkaline is salt. We use salt to kill snails. If the sand is salty, those of us in far Ibejuleki close to the sea, you cannot rear snails. You can also not rear snails in a normal cage system. They will certainly die, because in the cage system, you're going to be clearing those sand every 2 weeks, because they eat, they are pests. They eat and they litter the soil with their waste. Because they ingest sand, one of the things they eat, they look for calcium in soil. Because they ingest sand when they eat, when they look for calcium, they eat back their excreta. Imagine a man eating his own excreta. So in no time, you will notice that the mortality rate will be high. So running a pen system is risky because you stand the chance of losing all the snails. Your best bet is to run a free-range snairy. A free-range snairy means creating a natural ecosystem. You are planted. So let me give you an example of how you go about a free-range. If we are going to start a free-range farm now, you do not introduce the snails today. What you do today is that you prepare the free-range pen. You plant the crops that they will eat to make a vegetation. It will take you 6 months, 5-6 months to prepare for the snails. And how do we prepare for the snails? You are going to plant, if you're going to rear 1,000 snails, you will plant 1,000 pawpaw. You have 1,000 pawpaw farms clustered around the pen. You're going to plant plantain, you're going to plant cocoyam, you're going to plant spinach, you're going to plant cucumber, you're going to plant pumpkin. So these are things they eat. This creature is a special creature. It eats the most expensive fruits that we eat. So you're going to prepare for them before you jump into that sector. I believe I've answered that question. So if you want more, you can actually join us in our agribusiness class, where we share so much about the snail value chain. Questions? No question.
What is the main challenge when it comes to mechanization? Is it funding?
So, how can I say funding is my problem when I have a business case? If you're setting up a company, you're going to pay for office space, you're going to pay labor, you're going to pay for raw materials. You have done your due diligence. You have prepared yourself to run a company. So how can I set out to run an agricultural firm, and I wake up to say my problem is mechanization? It means I am a small-time farmer who is not supposed to be in that space in the first place. That's why I'm crying that I do not have tractors and equipment. So if that is my case, it means I need to enter into cluster settlement. And in a cluster settlement, you're going to have small aggregation of small-time farmers forming a cooperative where they can collectively pay for tractors, pay for equipment, pay for all of these things to be able to drill their farms. So the next alternative is the cooperative. But where you have not made a business case, it means that you are amongst the small-time players. But let me dare to say that agribusiness is not small business. Agribusiness is big business. If you want to go into dairy farming, it's big business. If you want to go into greenhouse farming, it's big business. It's not for the small boys. So think about when you're entering this space, put the money down that you will use to run it. But the good news is that once you start, there are multinational firms, donor agencies will be chasing you once you are getting it right. But the bottom line is, prepare yourself, start, and these companies will come when you're getting it right. Questions?
Cocoa processing. Why do cocoa processing plants go moribund?
I said it earlier that your cocoa, if you go to the western part, most of the cocoa farm or farmland that you find are the ones that the people who planted it are no more. The children inherited those cocoa farms. And those cocoa farms, those 3 crops that were planted, are now, research has gone into cocoa. So if you are not chopping those things down and planting the new seeds, you are probably outdated. So those who planted are actually gone. The young ones are not so keen and interested in the upstream sector of the agri-value chain. Moreover, I shared again, if you do the cocoa analysis, you will see that Cote d'Ivoire is #1 in Africa. Highly competitive. Next is Ghana. Highly competitive. They have the Cocoa Research Board that has done a lot. So if you go to our own Cocoa Research Institute, visit Crane, and what you will see in Crane will tell you the story of cocoa. We actually took participants to Crane, and it was a nice saw, some of the things we saw. Imagine a research institute that is going into sales, that is going into brewing of alcohol, that is going into marketing of bread, that is going into, and we ask, is this your mandate? Your mandate is to continuously research in cocoa and equip farmers within the cocoa cluster, but they've moved away from their mandate. So that's the problem with government institution. So when we visited Crane, and that same day we visited IITA, and you could see the difference between IITA and Crane. So that's why we have that problem with cocoa.
Thank you so much. The time is fast spent. In summary, the webinar today, we have learned that COVID-19 has had tremendous impact on the world economy, raising the fear of the global economy entering the worst depression since 1929. The decision to venture into the agribusiness sector must not be based on what others are currently doing in the sector. Because the sector is unlike other sectors, it is a sector that requires patience, capital, hand-holding, training, and continuous innovation. Business decisions must be based on the accomplishment of a burning desire, dream, and vision driven by an overwhelming passion to succeed. Investment in any of the agribusiness value chain requires investment in knowledge, training, and mentorship. So we are not to rush into any of this value chain because we have money. You need knowledge, you need training, and you also need mentorship. We hope your expectations have been met on this webinar. Kindly send us more questions via email, and your concerns will be addressed.
Can I take one comment? Okay. So I see some questions that are real active questions, like the person that asked, agricultural business participates into agricultural piggery, and what are the inherent opportunities in the sector? So you're asking, how can individuals who work 8 to 9, 8 to 5 invest in agriculture? You know, in my closing summary, I talked about do not run this investment by proxy. That if you are not there, forget it, do not go into it now. Prepare your plans and jump into this business when you are fully ready. One error from your agronomy, one error from the vet doctor can kill all your pigs. So all of these things we share in the class. So I run a program in the business school that sits on a tripod. The first module is titled Critical Thinking and Understanding the Agri-Value Chain. It runs for 1 week. We end up taking you to visit most of those multinational firms to see what they are doing. The second module is entrepreneurial mindset, which opens you up to sales, marketing, distribution, logistics in the agri-value chain. The third module is another 1 week, operational excellence, which takes you through certification. It takes you through quality. It takes you through, my product must stand out. If I must be in this sector, I must be one of the best in the sector. And increasingly, we are beginning to see our participants showcase themselves as our graduates showcase themselves as the best in this sector. So I dare to say those of us that are so interested in this sector, find out about the LBS Agribusiness program and join us such that you will be one of the new first-class flyers agribusiness operators in Nigeria. Thank you very much. It's been an exciting and wonderful time with you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kelikume. Thank you also to Ejiro and Esther that have been at the back end, making sure that this webinar runs smoothly. While we continue to pray for the end of the pandemic, stay safe, practice social distancing, and remember to wash your hands. For more details on the Agribusiness Management Program, kindly get in touch with us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.